Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome to this race preview for tomorrow's 2021 Azerbaijan Grand Prix from the streets of Baku, in a race that is going to be a lot more exciting than Monaco, obviously, because in Monaco you just can't overtake simply. And in Baku, because of that pit straight and the OP DRS, we are going to get plenty of overtaking tomorrow. I don't really doubt that at all. And I think we are going to get, really, throughout the entire field, a great battle that goes on for at least the first three quarters of the Grand Prix. And yeah, I think we are in for a very good Grand Prix. And hopefully you guys, after qualifying, doing well. And hopefully with me tonight, you will preview tomorrow's race and give your thoughts as to what you think will happen. Also, make sure to give your thoughts as to what you thought of the events in qualifying. Let me know that as well. But on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that is the starting grid at the moment for tomorrow's race. It's not the same as the result of qualifying. You'll notice that Lando Norris is now down to 9th because Lando has a 3-place grid penalty for that red flag infringement, where he did not pit when he should have when the red flags came out. And of course, at the bottom, you will see Lance Stroll ahead of Giovinazzi. The reason Stroll is ahead is because of, obviously, last year's finishing order and this year's finishing order. Or not finishing order, but current order in the Constructors. Because they both didn't set a lap time, Stroll ends up ahead because of that. But of course, Stroll and Giovinazzi on the back row of the grid. But in qualifying, this is how it went. So, of course, Charles Leclerc's second pole position in a row, his first pole position ever in Baku, Ferrari's second pole in Baku. Lewis Hamilton second. What a result for Lewis Hamilton, yet again proving why he is, for me, the GOAT, and why he is still the man to beat. And not only the man to beat, but he is going to be so hard to beat this season for Max, because he is still performing, Lewis, at an incredibly high level, given that the car is not quite there this season. Again, great performance by Lewis Hamilton. Max Verstappen third. Would you have got pole in the end? I don't think he would have, because he had, almost 3.5 tenths of a second to make up. He could have made it up, but I don't think he would have. I think it was too early to say as well on his lap that he was, up by enough to get pole position. So, at the end of the day, just not good enough. Pierre Gasly fourth. What a lap by him. Carlos Sainz fifth. As I'll get into later with the speed traps and sector times, he will yet again be very disappointed, because his sector times in certain sectors were actually really good. Lando Norris, of course, 6th, but drops to 9th, so that means Perez will start 6th, and then Tsunoda 7th, and then Alonso in 8th. Great drive by Fernando Alonso. Exactly what we want to see from him. And then 9th will be Norris, of course. 10th, Valtteri Bottas. What an awful day for him. Can't say I'm surprised, because the Mercedes car, despite Hamilton being so close to pole, Mercedes car this weekend has looked still not very comfortable at all. And then outside the top 10, you got Vettel, Ocon, Ricciardo, Raikkonen, Russell, Latifi, Schumacher, Mazepin. And then, as I said, Stroll and Giovinazzi at the very back, both crashing out before even setting a lap time in qualifying 1. Let's now get into the teams and start off with a very homely picture of Lewis Hamilton hugging his, personal trainer, I think? Or assistant, or whatever you want to call her, but she's very, very important, she is, in Lewis Hamilton's career. We can be safe of that. But Hamilton, yeah, like I said a moment ago, today, phenomenal drive. Shouldn't have been really anywhere near getting on the front row, given how poor the Mercedes car looked in practice, how poor the Mercedes car even was for Valtteri Bottas, even his teammate. Again, tremendous performance. Hamilton, again, just showing why he has been basically impossible to beat in the last few years, because qualifying, which, you know, of course, in the races, you can change things, and you can, even if you qualify behind a rival, you can still outrace them. But with Lewis Hamilton, because of how good of a driver he is at, say, getting out into the lead and defending his position and so forth, his qualifying performances so many times in the last few years have won him races, won him world championships. I remember Paul di Resta early on Sky F1 saying and making a great point that we've seen so many times in the last few years Lewis Hamilton putting in a lap that's essentially not won him the championship, but has really swung the title race in his favour. And that lap was another one of those laps, because again, Verstappen coming here was the favourite for pole. Still really should have got pole today, Max Verstappen, but wasn't to be. We'll get into that in a moment. But Hamilton still ending up out-qualifying Max Verstappen. Hamilton has now out-qualified Verstappen in 4 of the first 6 races, which, considering how quick the Red Bull has been and how the Mercedes has definitely struggled a bit, is very, very impressive. Very, very impressive, and he should be very proud of that. And I'm sure by the end of the season, given how good he is, and that I think Mercedes will improve slightly as the season goes on, wouldn't be surprised at all if Lewis Hamilton ended up out-qualifying Verstappen over the course of the season. But yeah, for tomorrow in the Grand Prix, as I said, and we'll show later on, Lewis Hamilton did cut a lot of wing off. He put on a rear wing, or lower, low drag rear wing is what I'm trying to say, before qualifying. And in qualifying, it helped him massively. In fact, I would say it was a definite factor as to why he finished up in second place. I mean, if he had the higher drag rear wing, I don't think he would have ended up second, but I still don't think it would have been a poor performance by any stretch. I think he still would have been, say, in there, say, 5th or 6th, but that definitely helped him. And I think in the race tomorrow, that will also help him quite a bit, because, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull that nowadays is pretty good in a straight line, and in the final sector, as we'll show, looks very, very quick. Going to be one of those races where he's going to need that type of advantage to hold off Max Verstappen, who I do think will be very, very quick and keen to get on with it in the Grand Prix. But when it comes to him versus Charles Leclerc, if he can be within a second of Leclerc by lap 3 or 4, then he's really in play, as long as he is still in second place, because he should be able then, say 2 or 3 laps later, at least, pass Charles Leclerc for the lead of the Grand Prix. Because again, he is, and I'll show later the speed trap sector times, that he does have very good speed down the straights, and the Mercedes powered cars especially do have very good power by the looks of it from the data. So even though Max Verstappen, I think, will be definitely the most aggressive and will be looking to make the most moves in the Grand Prix, because he'll be desperate not to be beaten by Lewis Hamilton tomorrow, I would say, given that top 3, it'd have to be advantage Lewis Hamilton. Only a slight advantage, I will add. Max Verstappen can still easily win the race tomorrow. I think it's that close. Hamilton and Verstappen, the battle will be won by an overtake, or by Hamilton doing what he did in qualifying. The point I'm trying to make is, if Max wins the race tomorrow, he will have to overtake Lewis Hamilton. Whether it's at the start or after the start, he will have to overtake Lewis Hamilton on track, because we know Mercedes, when it comes to strategy, are so good, and I don't see Red Bull getting past that way. So, yeah, like I said, if Verstappen's going to win, he's going to have to pass this man on track, which is very, 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 very hard to do, because he is one of the best defensive drivers. And when I mean defensive, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean just his defending skills are so good that if he's going to pass him in the Grand Prix, it's going to have to be one hell of a move to get that race win. But yeah, I think tomorrow, still, the battle for victory will be between, as it normally has been this season, Hamilton and Verstappen. Charles Leclerc, I think, definitely does have a chance of winning, say 30 to 40%. But I think ultimately he will not be able to compete with Hamilton and Verstappen during the race, because it'll be a race where, again, if they get within a second of Leclerc, I think Leclerc will concede quite a bit of ground on that pit straight. And also, I think still Mercedes and Red Bull, when it comes to pit strategy and stuff like that, are still clearly better than the Ferrari team, so they can easily find their way past in that as well. So Charles Leclerc's not completely out of play. He will play a factor definitely in the first stint. But ultimately, I do believe that the fight for victory is Hamilton versus Verstappen. And if Lewis Hamilton can maintain the lead on lap 1, and there's not a safety car on lap 1, which is, well, they're asking for a miracle. We've had so many safety cars or virtual safety cars on lap 1 so far this season. But if that doesn't happen, then I think Hamilton should be the favourite to win the race. He really should be, because of how he's driving, and again, because of the rear wing that he's running for the rest of the weekend going into the Grand Prix as well. For Valtteri Bottas, yeah, Bottas is really, I won't say in trouble. I think he will make progress from 10th on the grid. It's just, I don't see what result Bottas really can get. Maybe 7th or 8th, but the cars ahead of him are so quick. They're not slow in comparison, or really slow rather, compared to the Mercedes this weekend. And also the drivers ahead of him are very, very good. Alonso, Perez, Sainz, Gasly, and of course the top 3. And then, you've got Vettel and Ricciardo right behind him. So I don't really see what Bottas can do tomorrow that would end up for him being a good result. As long as he scores points, I guess, which is depressing to say, but that's just the way it is. But for Lewis Hamilton, what a lap he did a great job, but tomorrow, as long as he produces more of his best form, which he's done so many times this season already, then he's looking good. He's looking good to possibly reclaim the lead of the World Championship. And talking of his rival that we've talked about so long, let's go on to him now, Max Verstappen. Now, I know plenty of Verstappen fans will be disappointed on the red flag at the very end of the session, possibly costing Max Verstappen pole position. I get that. But what's the excuse for Max Verstappen not doing a good enough run the first time in Q3? Because when you come to a street circuit that this is a massive possibility. Someone at the end of the session crashing and ruining your lap. Very, very high possibility of that happening in Baku or Monaco that we were, at 2 weeks ago. Again, that's a very high possibility. And the reason it's happened the last 2 weeks is because it most of the time does happen, unfortunately. But I just don't understand why Max, and he's done this not just, at the last 2 races, which have been street circuits. He's done this, in Portugal, at Imola, where he's not put in a first attempt in qualifying that's been simply good enough, anywhere near good enough to get pole position. And I said this at the very end of my qualifying watch along. The reason Lewis Hamilton is so good in qualifying and so clinical when it comes to pole positions is that his first attempt out of 2 in Q3 normally is his best effort, because he knows that if something happens at the end, he has a very, very good lap time to fall back on. It's a very smart thing, to do. With Max Verstappen, it almost feels like not deliberate that he doesn't put in a great lap, but he doesn't have that mental approach of this is got to be the lap, when Hamilton, I think, has that mental approach. And I think he's got to change up the way he's, I guess, managing Q3, because it's costing him a lot, because he's always putting too much pressure on himself going into that final run, which is what led to a mistake in Imola, mistakes, well, not mistakes, but, you know, how he ended up doing in Portimao. I mean, of course, he made a mistake in his first run, which put the pressure massively on. But then, you know, Monaco probably should have been, if he was quick enough for pole, should have been getting it, you know, into P1 on the first run. And then here, again, he's got to do better. He really has to do better. And he just isn't in qualifying. In the races, Max Verstappen is, or has been this season, almost perfect. I can't really fault him for this season in the races. The only things were what? Overtaking Hamilton off circuit in Bahrain, which was a minor thing. And wasn't really a mistake. It was more just an infringement on the rules. And then, Portugal going slightly wide on the exit of a corner that gave Hamilton a good run on him to overtake him. And, you know, all the other races, he's in the race been absolutely fine. And this is what I mean. In the races, fine. And that's why in qualifying, he's got to get it absolutely right, because we know how great he can be on race day. Just look at the Monaco Grand Prix. He was not under any threat whatsoever that entire race, because he's such a good driver over the course of a Grand Prix. Same with Imola. As soon as he got into the lead, even though Hamilton was very quick and catching him at times, because of how, I guess, not dominant, but assertive and safe he tends, or not safe, but when he's in the lead of a Grand Prix, put it this way, it's very hard to see him just losing it like that, like other drivers have in the past. It's very hard, like Lewis Hamilton, very hard to overtake him on circuit or to force a mistake out of him. So, again, the races, he's absolutely fine. It's just qualifying. He cannot get the job done, and it will cost him. It will cost him this season if he doesn't win the championship, because even though in Imola he got the win, in Portugal, he probably could have won the race if he had got qualifying right. Of course, Monaco, he won the race, and then if he doesn't win tomorrow, I think he'll have to look at qualifying and say, well, if I had got pole, then he, you know, probably could have won the race. So the big weakness so far this season, and it's the biggest weakness that I think Lewis Hamilton is exploiting in Max Verstappen at the moment. In the races, those two couldn't be any closer. But in qualifying, Hamilton has been clearly better than Max Verstappen. And it will, like I said, over the course of the season, because you can't expect drivers to make massive progress from their grid position every single Grand Prix, it will eventually cost him. So he's got to get on top of it very, very soon. But yeah, disappointing, you know, 3rd place and 6th place for Sergio Perez on the grid. Poor lap, very, very poor lap. And again, same for him. Why could he not put in a better earlier run? Why not? I don't get it. If he really had the pace, he should be able, considering the quality that he has, to put in a good early attempt, but he just didn't. But for Max Verstappen, he still has a great chance of winning tomorrow. Great, great chance. Like I said, it'll be him versus Lewis Hamilton most likely. Leclerc will play a factor, but I don't think Leclerc, in the end, will win the Grand Prix. I think with Max Verstappen, I think the biggest thing going into the race that he needs to remind himself is that it's a 51-lap race, not a 1-lap race or a 10-lap race. Because even if he gets ahead of Hamilton at the start, that doesn't mean he will beat him, because Hamilton, as we've seen so far this season, after that first lap has ended up coming back at Verstappen and still winning. and still putting the manners on Max Verstappen. And I think Verstappen, even if he is behind Hamilton after the first lap, he has to make sure that he doesn't get too aggressive on that first lap, because, you know, with the disappointment he has suffered in this qualifying session going into the race, he could easily, in the race tomorrow, just go and have a stupid crash at the start and end up throwing away a load of points, which he cannot do. And again, has to remember that the battle for victory tomorrow will not be won at the first corner or on the first lap. It will be contested, very hotly contested, over the entire race distance. And I think he has to remember that, because even if he's not leading in the first 10 or 20 laps, doesn't mean he can't win the race. He could easily strike late on, which I think if Max if he needs to wait that long to strike, then he's going to have to, instead of just going for it early on. Needs to be a bit sensible and a bit cautious, I think, to start off with the race, and then once it becomes clear who his rivals are, then progressively go for it. But one thing I hope I don't see from him is, again, just a massive dive bomb at turn 1 or turn 3, because if he does that, then around Baku, there's a very high chance of him having contact or having an accident. But yeah, for Sergio Perez, I think Perez will be fine. I think Perez will probably finish in the top 4, top 5. We'll have to see. I mean, Sainz and Gasly are, of course, very good drivers, and they will not just easily concede position. But now that I've reviewed Mercedes and Red Bull, what I would say is Lewis Hamilton, for me, is the slight, very, very slight favourite to win. And when I mean very slight favourite, I would say his chances are, you know, 1% higher than Verstappen. It's that close for me. If Hamilton does win, or even if Verstappen wins, I think the gap between the two is going to be only a second or 2 seconds. I don't think it's going to be a massive gap. And like I said, Charles Leclerc, as we'll get into in a moment, he will be in there, but I'd have to give the slight, very slight advantage to Lewis Hamilton. The only reason I give that to him is because, again, as I'll show soon, of his speed in that final sector due to his lower drag rear wing that he put on before qualifying. That will really help him in the race. 1, to get past Leclerc if needs be, and 2, to defend against Max Verstappen if needs be, and even to pass Max Verstappen if that does need to happen. So I'm going to go Hamilton. If I was to predict now, yeah, Hamilton to win the Grand Prix tomorrow from Verstappen second and Charles Leclerc in third place. Again, though, Max Verstappen has still a very great chance of winning the race. I have to make that clear. It's so close between the two that it's not a clear run thing. Talking of Ferrari with Leclerc, let's get onto them now. Great day, pole position. Leclerc, again, over a single lap, has been, this season, and I've said this so many times, has just been incredible. 4th in Bahrain, 4th at Imola, Portugal he was 8th, Spain he was 4th, and then Monaco pole, Baku pole. I mean, considering the pace of the Ferrari so far this season, and where his teammate has qualified most of the time, I can't really praise him anymore. Been just so great in qualifying, and another great performance. Yes, he did get the red flags at the end of the Q3 at the absolute right time, but I think Leclerc would have held on for pole position because I think his lap was so good. That first initial run in 1 minute 41.2, I just think that lap was so good that I don't think anyone else would have beaten it, and I think Leclerc possibly could have even improved on that lap. So, yeah, Leclerc deserved pole position. Like I said, though, I don't think ultimately he will have enough pace to win the Grand Prix. Hamilton and Verstappen, 2 absolute monsters, really, in the race, and I think they are in better race cars than the Ferrari. Leclerc's, though, going to be in the fight. I mean, I think he'll maintain the lead on the first lap because the run down to turn 1 is, well, non-existent. It's very, very small. So I think he'll be fine on the first lap or the first few laps. But I think once they get within DRS of Leclerc, even though actually the Ferrari's top speed has actually improved a lot, and you'll see that in a moment in the speed trap data, even though it's improved a lot, it's still not as good as, say, the Mercedes or the Honda. Definitely the Mercedes. So, again, especially with Lewis Hamilton running a bit less drag, I think Leclerc will struggle to win the race tomorrow. He still has a chance. Like I said, 30 to 40%. He'll be fighting in there, and he'll give it his absolute best. But I think ultimately it will be only third place for him, which would honestly be a good result for Charles Leclerc. He did not come to Baku, I think, expecting a podium finish. He probably would have hoped for one if there was a bit of chaos, but I don't think he would have expected one on pure pace, which I think he will get in the race tomorrow. For Carlos Sainz, he'll be disappointed again. I'll get onto the sector times in a moment. He was very good in certain sectors, but when it mattered most in one of the sectors, as I'll show, he just wasn't good enough. But I think Carlos Sainz as well, I think will be in there in the race, but say between 4th, 5th and 6th. I think Carlos Sainz will probably finish in 5th or 6th. I think his main fight will be with Pierre Gasly. I don't think he'll be really with, say, Tsunoda and Alonso behind. So Ferrari, honestly, going into the race tomorrow, they could expect to score at least 25 points, which, of course, that is a race win in terms of points. That would be such a great points haul that it would put them out of sight briefly from McLaren, who I think are now really struggling to keep up, honestly, with Ferrari, who are clearly faster now. I mean, the performance of the Ferrari around Baku is much better than I expected. I think you can say now Ferrari have left the midfield and they are now a top team again. They're not as good as Mercedes and Red Bull overall, but they're on the same platform, if you know what I mean. Just not as high on the platform, I guess you could say. Yeah, Ferrari, I think tomorrow will get a very good points haul. A podium, but ultimately not a race win. We'll quickly go through McLaren before we get on to the speed traps and the sector times, which are very interesting. So Lando Norris qualified, of course, in 6th place. He will start 9th because of the red flag infringement. Fully deserved. He would have actually got a 5th-place penalty if it was, say, under normal circumstances, but because he was coming into the pit lane at a very high speed, had to make a last-minute decision. They were a bit lenient in the punishment, but still good that he got punishment because, he clearly broke the rules there. But, top 10 starting position, another one for Norris. He's looking, I think, good for a 7th, 8th, maybe 6th at best. I don't think Norris will be getting into the top 5. I'd be very surprised if that happened. Daniel Ricciardo, though, 13th. What an awful day it was today. Qualifying, in 13th place and ended up crashing out at the end of Q2 was something that after practice, honestly, did not look likely, because Daniel Ricciardo has not exactly been getting away with it in terms of getting very close to the barriers or anything. He's not really been like that this weekend. And the McLaren has looked good, not great, but good. And Ricciardo actually, during the weekend, looked a tad better than I thought he would. And then goes and does that. His season is in absolute disarray. I think we can say that for sure. It will improve, I think. I think one of the races at the Red Bull Ring, I definitely see, probably the first one, let's say, I think Daniel Ricciardo will put in a strong performance there. But, yeah, for the next 2-3 weeks, I think Ricciardo is still going to have a bit of a struggle, especially mentally, because it just still isn't going his way. I mean, he can still score points from the position he's in, McLaren very quick down the straights, and Ricciardo, we know he can overtake. So he probably will end up either very close to points or nicking a point or two. We'll have to see. But an awful day. And yeah, just not what he needed. Not what he needed at all. But McLaren going into the race tomorrow, they'll pick up some points probably, but it'll be nothing to stop Ferrari from overtaking them in the Constructors' Championship. Now, let's get into the data. Now, coming into this weekend, I think we talked about it last week, or not last week, but the last Grand Prix weekend, about how Honda Power, the last time we were at a power track, really looked as though it was ruling the way. Now we're at another, I would say, power circuit in Baku. I mean, other people would say, oh, well, you need a lot of grip. Yeah, you do, but, the final sector is so long and such a high acceleration zone, because it is literally full throttle. If you don't have the power, you are going to struggle here. So that's why we're going to look at these speed traps. And I do think that I need to change my, not opinion, but my look on this, because I was, again, saying that Honda Power was stronger at the minute than Mercedes Power. But if I look at especially the two lists on the left, speed trap and the finish line speed trap, the Mercedes powered cars look better than the Honda powered cars. I mean, the speed trap, you can see on the far left, Sebastian Vettel is by far the quickest. And you'll actually see in a moment in the sector time, Sebastian Vettel was very quick in the high-speed sectors of the circuit, which I think does bode well for tomorrow for Sebastian. And then you've got Bottas up there, Russell, Hamilton, and you've got Latifi down in 11th. But, in the top 10, you've got 4 Honda-powered cars in general. And in Mercedes, you've got, obviously, the Mercedes Works team, McLaren, Aston Martin, and Williams, I believe, are the only Mercedes-powered teams, if I've got that right, yes. So, you look at the top 10, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 Mercedes-powered teams, and then you've only got 2 Honda-powered teams. The other 2 Honda-powered teams are quite a bit down. And then, again, if you look at the finish line one as well, in the top 10, you've got Hamilton, Russell, Latifi, Vettel, Bottas. And again, the Honda-powered cars, most of them are below them. So I have to revise my, I guess you could say opinion. It's not really an opinion, though. I guess you could say at the minute. But I would say Merc Power at the minute is ahead of Honda. Because I just think the data shows it there. I will say, though, the biggest thing to take out from this is not that Mercedes are back ahead. It's Ferrari. Because look at Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. 2nd and 5th in the speed trap on the far left. And over the finish line, Carlos Sainz was the quickest by a very big margin. You can see there, 10 kilometers an hour. But if you forget that and just look at the one on the left-hand side, again, 2nd and 5th ahead of Hamilton, Latifi in the Mercedes-powered Williams, and Ricciardo, and 2 Honda-powered Red Bull. So Ferrari have made a definite step forward on their power unit. A definite step forward on the power unit, which is very much needed, because that was the only thing really they've been missing with their car. They've got a car aerodynamically which is right there with Mercedes and Red Bull. Don't know if it's better. Maybe it is, say slightly, but it's there with Mercedes and Red Bull. The only thing they needed to improve upon was power. And if you look at the 2 lists on the left-hand side, and even the intermediates, Sainz and Leclerc, and even Kimi Raikkonen on the finish line one, very high up. So Ferrari have improved their power unit performance a lot. Also, Renault with the Alpine team have improved. I wouldn't say they have risen from being, say, the slowest power unit on the grid, but they're not as bad as they were. In Bahrain, it was actually quite a bit off, where they were last season, where they needed to be. So, yeah, better, I'd say, for Renault, but not anything spectacular. But again, I'd say Mercedes power looks as though it's at the very least right there with Honda, if not slightly ahead by the looks of it. And then again, Ferrari, much improved. I wouldn't, though, say Ferrari are stronger than, say, Mercedes. And I don't think Ferrari have the most powerful engine on the grid right now. But they are right there with the second of the, Mercedes, Honda power units. Whoever is second most powerful, say, at a given weekend, I would say Ferrari are right there with that team, or that power unit, rather. But Ferrari have made massive gains on the power unit, because if you remember from Bahrain, they were about 5 kilometers an hour down on the Honda power and Mercedes powered teams. Now it's more like, say, if you look at the finish line one, I mean, Carlos Sainz's one on the finish line one, I think might have been a very OP slipstream, which I think might tell you why he was 10 kilometers an hour quicker across the finish line than anyone else. But if you compare, say, Leclerc, Raikkonen to, say, Hamilton, then again, it's no longer 5 kilometers, it's about 2.5. So they've cut it basically in half, which again is good news on that front for the Ferrari team. And I think Ferrari going forward for this season could end up getting more than just one race win. They could actually end up with a couple, maybe 3. We'll have to see. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. But getting to the sector times, it also paints a good picture of where people are in terms of who has good grip and, say, who has good levels of power. So you can see in Sector 3, which again is completely full throttle, Hamilton and Vettel, 2 Mercedes-powered cars, first and second, and then followed by the 2 Ferraris, then Latifi, then Raikkonen, and then Tsunoda, Russell, Bottas, Perez. Again, more Mercedes-powered cars in the top 10 in Sector 3 than Honda power. So that's why, again, I have to revise my stance that Honda power is, better at the moment than Mercedes power. I was wrong. It is now currently Mercedes power, as the data clearly shows. Ferrari power, though, is right there with Honda at the moment, you'd have to say. Again, looking at Sector 3, you have to say it's right there, if not maybe slightly ahead of me. Maybe they're slightly slightly ahead because they've cut maybe a bit more wing off. Maybe that's why. But I think if you look again at the speed traps, the sector data, the Ferrari PU is much better than it was, of course, last year and compared to even Bahrain. So great news for Ferrari fans out there. But when it comes to the sectors, so with Carlos Sainz, for example, when I was saying, once you see the sector times, you'll see why Carlos Sainz should be disappointed. He was ahead of Lewis Hamilton in the first and second sector. In fact, after the first 2 sectors, he was about 1/10 of a second up on Hamilton. But then in the final sector, Hamilton was almost 2/10 quicker because of that lower drag rear wing, which I think still shows that even though Ferrari have improved on their power unit, they're still not quite there. If, Hamilton can go and do that. Verstappen, very quick in Sector 1 and Sector 2, but losing out in Sector 3, which to me shows that, because, Sector 1 is not just, it is, I'd say, mostly about power, but there's also some very important corners, turn 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it kind of almost evens itself out. sometimes, depending on, the type of runs you get out of the corners. But to me, it looks as though Red Bull have put maybe a tad bit more wing on their car than Mercedes have, and possibly Ferrari as well. So that will be a worry for Red Bull tomorrow if they are under threat from a car behind, because I think they might, again, be running a bit more wing than Mercedes and Ferrari. I don't think they have as much power from their PU as they had in Bahrain compared to their rivals. So, yeah, I think Red Bull, in that factor, aren't looking so great, if I'm going to be honest. And then you look at, Pierre Gasly, up in third place in Sector 1 and Sector 2. But if you look at Sector 3, Gasly miles down on everyone else. Again, the Honda PU today just wasn't anywhere near as strong overall as the Mercedes PU. Just wasn't. Again, the data, the factual data, clearly proves that. Also, I think another thing that proves that is, Sebastian Vettel qualified in 11th, and in Sector 1 and Sector 3, which are the most, say, more so power dominant sectors, Vettel was 6th in Sector 1 and 2nd in Sector 3. And he was actually faster than Lewis Hamilton in Sector 1. He lost how much time? About half a second to Hamilton in the second sector, and then was about a tenth of a second slower in the final sector, but still quicker than everyone else behind him. So, point I'm trying to make is Mercedes power, yet again, rules the way, I believe. And I think even if Hamilton ends up behind Verstappen after the start, I think Hamilton has the speed and Mercedes have the speed from their PU to make serious gains and end up still getting overtakes done. It will be very hard, of course, because Verstappen and Leclerc are very good defensively, but like I said, Mercedes power looking very, very strong at this particular Grand Prix meeting. But before I go on to the rest of the teams, I'm just going to quickly come to you guys in the chat, and then we'll get into the rest of the teams. And by the way, again, like I've said plenty of times this weekend, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I will be live tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. UK time for the race watch along for tomorrow's 2021 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Me and Nib, of course, will be covering it for you guys. A race that should be good. So yeah, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for that. Bottom right of the screen, you can subscribe there, or just go to my homepage and do it there. And whilst you're there, hit the notifications bell, and also don't forget to smash the like button as well. Let me read out some comments here if I can. Crystal Racing asking, are Red Bull and AlphaTauri favouring downforce with bigger wing angle, therefore compromising top speed and suffering more drag? Like I said, I think they are probably running more wing, but I don't think it's much more wing, because you'd be stupid to run that much more wing than another team, because it's not like it was unexpected how important, that's the word I was looking for. It's not unexpected how important that final sector in terms of power or top speed is for your lap, and for even for overtaking the race. It's not a surprise. So I think, yeah, they probably are running more wing, but I don't think it's a massive amount. I think it's probably a tad more. So I don't think that's why they're lower down in the speed traps. I think it's because Mercedes have, and we can say, I mean, since Bahrain, Mercedes overall with their car aerodynamically and with their power unit have improved their car quite a bit from where it was, because after testing, it was not in a good way at all. I think the Red Bull car, in comparison to the Mercedes in Bahrain, was much stronger than it is now, even though the Red Bull car is still pretty good. So, again, I think they're running more wing, and they've got more drag on their car, but I don't think it's much more. I don't think it's making that big a difference as it showed there. I refuse to believe it. Will F1 says it's possible that Tsunoda might have damaged the chassis depending on how much suspension and wishbone damage he did. I think he'll be fine because he went in frontward. If he had gone in on the side, like Leclerc did in Monaco, I think, yeah. But he didn't. He went in frontwards. I think he'll be absolutely fine with his car. Astrosteva says, or asks, thoughts on bringing back spare cars, please. Chaz, they shouldn't bother with that because it just costs way too much money. And most of the time, it's completely pointless because they're not even needed most of the time. So, yeah, there's no point in them. Let me find some other comments here if I can. Tonka says tyres are the symptom, but the aero is the problem for Mercedes. That's one thing we didn't look at quite, and I'll try and bring it back up with the sector times, is that, yeah, in the second sector, Mercedes, I don't know if this was because of the lower drag rear wing, but Mercedes were definitely nowhere near the action up front. I mean, yeah, they weren't miles off. They were, a tenth and a half, which is not that big of time to be losing. But it's hard to say really at the moment. I think the tyres, like Tonka was saying, the tyres might just be the symptom of the problem. We'll have to see. Because, in Portimao and Catalonia, aerodynamically, Mercedes were the strongest. But in Monaco and Baku, they've not quite been up to scratch as they were then. So it's hard to say right now, and I think we need to wait longer, because I think if we get to Paul Ricard and Mercedes struggle there, then yeah, Mercedes have an aero problem, without doubt. But I think the last two races, this one and the last one in Monaco, I just think because of the way the tracks are, it's too hard at the moment to say definitively that Mercedes have an aero problem. I mean, if they did have an aero problem, then why did they win the Spanish Grand Prix? That's kind of what I'm thinking at the moment. They wouldn't have won the Spanish Grand Prix if they had a serious aero problem. I kind of more so believe that it's more so what people were saying earlier, that I think they do struggle to warm the tyres up, which I don't think necessarily means they don't have the grip. Because if you actually notice, James Allison designed cars do tend to have problems warming their tyres up. Ferrari, when he designed their cars, had a similar issue, and that's why in qualifying, Ferrari back then weren't too great. And then I remember with Lotus in qualifying would have that problem, would end up not really qualifying well, but in the race, because they could keep their tyres in a nice window and not overheat them, because they weren't exactly warming them up massively, Lotus would end up in the race, doing a much better, or having a much better day of it. And I think since James Allison has took over as the designer of the Mercedes car, you've seen since that Mercedes have always been stronger in the races than they have in qualifying, which is a James Allison trait of his cars. They always are stronger in the race than they are in qualifying, his cars, because again of the way he designs them. So I think it's more so just a natural thing, because again, this is, like I said earlier, it's not a new issue. Mercedes have had this issue before. They had it about 3 or 4 years ago, in 2017. So I think it's more so just the way the car is designed. Don't think it's a problem where they don't have enough grip. I think it's just the way their car is designed in comparison to Red Bull and Ferrari. I think that's the difference there. Let me find some other comments here if I can before I get on to the rest of the teams. Chris asks, do you think Sainz will get a penalty for gearbox? No, I don't think he will. Again, his crash, he didn't go rear end in. It was more so, I mean, he did spin round, but it was more so, did he have a gearbox problem? Is that why he spun? Carlos Sainz. I thought he just locked up the rears because he saw Tsunoda ahead of him and was kind of shocked. I don't know. But if that was a gearbox problem, then I guess, yeah, he has to take a penalty. But in terms of the way he had his crash, I don't think at all, because the impact was front wing to barrier, even though he did spin around. Right, let me find a couple more comments in the chat, and we'll get on to the rest. Crystal Racing saying better speed from Tsunoda, still a bit scruffy. Yeah, still a bit, but a lot better. A lot better. That's exactly what he needed. And I think given the speed of the AlphaTauri, he should be scoring points tomorrow. Hopefully he doesn't have an accident, which of course he did have at the end of qualifying. He just needs to keep it together, make sure he stays within, a good gap of the cars ahead, because he's not a million miles away. Put it that way. Anyway, let's now get on to the rest of the teams. Sebastian Vettel, as I said, when I looked at the sector times there, he was very quick in Sector 1 and Sector 3. And honestly, I think if the red flag had not come out, he probably would have got into the top 10. Again, though, should have set a better lap. Firstly, in Q2, then he probably would have been in anyway, rather than having to leave it to the very end. Similar again to Verstappen and Perez. If you're really, quick in qualifying, you've got to make sure you do it early on, because, these red flags, yellow flags in street circuits, they can happen, and yes, they can ruin your day. So you just need to get it together sooner, I'm afraid. And, they know exactly that that's a possibility. But yeah, Sebastian Vettel 11th. He can start on whatever tyre he wants to. I think he will start on the medium, and I think Sebastian will try just to go as long into the race as he can, say into lap 30-something, and then pit for a soft compound tyre later on. And then if he needs to do any more overtaking, he can. But I think Sebastian Vettel will score points, say a couple. He's looking in a good way, Sebastian, and that's good to see. But just a shame he didn't bang in a better lap earlier in Q2 than he would have got through anyway. And for Lance Stroll, of course, very poor, crashing before even doing a lap. Same, of course, for Giovinazzi, but very, very poor for Lance Stroll. And he does have a chance still of points, because in Baku with the straight, of course, there's still a endless possibility to overtake, really. So he can still do it, and we've seen from the speed traps, the Aston Martin is probably one of the quickest cars in a straight line out there, so he can definitely do it, but it's going to be pretty hard, honestly, for him tomorrow. For AlphaTauri, though, what a day. 4th and 7th, they will be on the grid for tomorrow's Azerbaijan Grand Prix. That's their best qualifying result in a very long time. Very, very long time. I'm very happy for them. They deserve it. They've been very quick all weekend. I knew they were going to be quick this weekend because they do have a better car for these type of circuits than a circuit like Monaco or Spain or, tracks like that. Again, they are probably running more wing than, say, Mercedes, Ferrari, and maybe McLaren as well. We'll have to see on that. But I do think their PU is probably not performing as well as they expected compared to Mercedes and Ferrari as well. So I think AlphaTauri, maybe if this race was held 2 months ago, I think AlphaTauri probably would have had a better, starting position for the race. Gasly might have actually been on the front row. You don't know. As well, worth a mention, Gasly only 0.02 of a second slower than Max Verstappen in qualifying. Get this man in a top car now. Do we need any more evidence? Do we really need any more evidence? The guy is on fire, and that's his now going to be his fourth top 5 finish or starting position for a race so far this season. How good is that? In an AlphaTauri, when you've got a very competitive Mercedes team, Red Bull team, Ferrari team, McLaren team, how good is that? Can't describe how good it is, honestly. Very, very great performance by him. Also, very happy for Yuki Tsunoda, as I said earlier in the stream, suffering I think from some mental health issues, honestly, in the first few races, and been rooting for the guy because obviously I've had my own issues in the past. And I think he's been suffering quite a bit, and I think deserved a day, obviously in the sun in Baku, but not just literally, but in his own mind as well, because he's had a tough time of it. I'm sure he's learnt quite a bit, and I think in the race tomorrow, he will score points. I don't think it'll be a massive amount. Probably, I think he'll probably finish 8th or 9th, but I think Tsunoda definitely tomorrow gets a massive confidence boost with whatever that points finish is. Even if it's 10th place, I think he will be boosted a lot because, you know, for him, after the struggles he's had in the last few races, to get a points finish here would be really big for his confidence. I really hope he gets it. So we'll see what he can do. But yeah, AlphaTauri looking very quick, and they should have 2 cars in the points tomorrow. Not a guarantee though, because they've not exactly been good at scoring points on a Sunday. For Alpine, great day for Fernando Alonso. Very happy to see him in the top 8 on the grid. This is what he needed. Because this has really been his biggest weakness, is performance on a Saturday, on a single lap. It's cost him so many times good results because he's been good in the races so far this season. You know, Portugal, he was very strong. Spain, I thought actually he did quite well considering. I know he did fall out of the points later on, but he did quite well considering he was trying to get a one-stop strategy to the end of the race. But again, his qualifying let him down, but it did not today. 8th place he will start the Grand Prix from. His fight is going to be, say, with Bottas, Tsunoda, Norris, Vettel, his teammate, Ricciardo. That will be his fight in the Grand Prix tomorrow. I don't know, though, if he will score points. It's kind of a 50-50 in my mind, honestly. And same for Ocon, even though Ocon will start on whatever tyre he wants to. Not a guarantee in my mind that, you know, Alpine will score points tomorrow. I will say as well, like I said earlier, Renault power has also improved quite a bit from the first Grand Prix, which is good to see, but they're still not quite maybe as good as they were last year, as they want to be this year. But Alpine, I'd say good result considering I wasn't expecting much coming into the weekend. And I think tomorrow, again, between 8th and 12th is where they're going to be fighting. For Alfa Romeo, Kimi Raikkonen, of course, down in 14th position. Raikkonen, considering his qualifying struggles, I think, to be honest, this is the best he could have done. For Antonio Giovinazzi, again, just like Stroll, very, very poor, crashing out before even doing a single lap. Not good enough, and especially not good enough because he could have ended up probably qualifying in 12th or even 11th place, considering his single lap speed so far this weekend has been very good. So, very, very disappointing for him. And yeah, he will most likely not score any points. But Alfa Romeo with Raikkonen might not actually be too far away in the end for a points finish. Watch out for them for sure. Of course, Williams, 15th and 16th. That was probably the best they were going to do. Can't really complain for Williams. I think if there's a lot of chaos tomorrow, I think Russell might be able to nick a point, but I'm not going to bet on it because, well, how many times does it look likely he's going to score a point and it's not happened? Plenty of times is the answer to that. So, yeah, not going to predict it, but Williams, again, if there is a load of safety cars and chaos, then watch out for them as well. But go back to this picture, actually, of Leclerc and Verstappen. That is it for the stream, guys. And I think, given that it's been about an hour, I'm just going to come straight off. Thank you guys very much for coming along to this race preview tonight for tomorrow's 2021 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Again, I will be live tomorrow with Nib at 12:30 p.m. UK time for the race watch along for the 2021 Azerbaijan Grand Prix from Baku. So don't forget to subscribe for that. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it there. Or go to my channel page and subscribe then. Don't forget to hit the notifications bell. Smash the like button on this video and also share this video and channel everywhere you can. And also, comment down below What do you think will happen in tomorrow's race? Just give me your predictions for the Grand Prix tomorrow. And don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. That is the best place for notifications of my videos and streams if you're desperate for those vital notifications. But guys, until tomorrow's race watch along, again, 12:30 PM UK time. Can't wait for it. It's been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.